With me now, Matt Schlapp, chairman of the American Conservative Union and former political director for George W. Bush. Welcome back, sir. And Ambassador Norm Eisen, a CNN contributor and former White House ethics czar during the Obama administration. Mr. Ambassador, a pleasure to have you on, and nice to meet you. Let's begin, Matt Schlapp, with you. And before we get into the nitty-gritty, why on behalf of the White House, why aren't they just more forthcoming on information on this issue?
I don't know all the facts here. I think this is one of the frustrations for the American people, Brooke, is that there's a lot that's being said. There's a lot. Who seems to have the most information on all this are many of these reporters for the New York Times and the Washington Post.
I'm sorry, Matt, but if this happened at the White House, and according to the Times, and again, this is a report, but if it's two White House officials, including someone, a senior director on the National Security Council, how would the White House not know and not have the information to at least pass along some of it to the public?
Yeah, look, all I can tell you is I worked in a White House for 4 years, and a lot of people come in and out, including a lot of members of Congress. And that's part of the process. I don't think we should assume that there's anything inappropriate with those meetings, but all of this information in the end is going to come out in these investigations. And if anybody did something untoward or inappropriate, we're going to find out. I think the bigger question is for Chairman Nunes is clearly the person or people he talked to, they demanded to have as much confidentiality as they can in order to pass over the information. It's often called a whistleblower who does that. And I don't know if that's the case in this situation, but it has all the appearances of that.
You know, Mr. Ambassador, to you as an ethics czar, I mean, let's take Matt, and say, let's say there was nothing maybe nefarious or maybe with regard to what happened. I think the issue, though, is Sean Spicer keeps coming back to this point that, you all are obsessed with the process, and it's not about the process. It's not, you don't give up your sources, so we're not giving up our sources. This is about the substance. But the process matters, doesn't it, sir?
It does, Brooke. Matt worked in the George W. Bush White House. He never would have countenanced this. Our country was attacked in an act of gray war by Russia through their cyber attack. The Congress is doing oversight, asking the question whether there were people around Mr. Trump, or the question whether Mr. Trump himself knew anything about it. That oversight is a holy duty under the American Constitution. You've got to remain at arm's length. If the New York Times report story is true, these are not whistleblowers in the White House. These are aiders and abettors in a cover-up. They are working actively with Mr. Nunes to do the opposite of oversight, to obscure what's going on. The process matters. If we don't have faith in the process, then we don't have faith in the outcomes. This is too important for Mr. Nunes' monkey business, and I think he's violated the rules here. In fact, my watchdog organization, CREW, has filed a complaint against him with the Office of Congressional Ethics.
Yeah, I
Aiders
always love...
and abettors in a cover-up, Matt. You got to respond to that.
Yeah, I always got to love CREW. You guys are pretty quick at going after Republicans. It's okay to be partisan. That's all right.
Not true,
and I
Matt.
think in all
Not
of this...
true. My co-chair is a Republican. George Bush, he's George Bush, W. Bush's ethics czar.
Yes,
it's bipartisan.
It's one of the most partisan organizations in Washington, and I think it's fine to be partisan. Everyone has a right to have their politics. Let's go back to the underlying issue, which is...
Well, let's go back to my question, though. Let's go back to my question. I mean, his allegation... Hang on. His allegation, if in fact if the report is true, and we don't know, but this is pinning it on the New York Times, he said aiders and abettors of a cover-up. I want you to respond to that.
There is no cover-up here, because what's happening is we're having a bipartisan investigation in both the House and the Senate, and the FBI is also looking at these very serious matters. I do agree that the idea that Russia tried to, affect our election outcomes is incredibly sobering and serious. I want to have the answers. If anybody colluded with them...
If you listen to Chairman Nunes, and also according to the New York Times piece and what the actual report was, corroborates what he said, which didn't have to do with Russia. He went off talking about masking, and
well,
not
Brooke,
on
I'm trying to follow where you're going here, okay? I'm talking about the investigations and the fact that of the seriousness of the investigations. If you want to talk about this particular interaction with Chairman Nunes, my only point is this, which is that information, as it relates to the inappropriate surveillance of political opponents, will also be made public. These are very serious charges. If they are unfounded charges, the people making those charges will have to account for them. But as I will just tell you, I am a Trump supporter, I am a partisan Republican. I am troubled by all kinds of questions here. I want to have the answers. I think the American people want to have the answers, and we're going to get them.
Let me play some sound. This is when President Trump sat down with Tucker Carlson at Fox News just a couple weeks ago, talking about this.
You're the president. You have the ability to gather all the evidence you want.
I do, but I think that, frankly, we have a lot right now. And I think if you watched the Brett Baier and what he was saying and what he was talking about and how he mentioned the word wiretap, you would feel very confident that you could mention the name. He mentioned it, and other people have mentioned it. But if you take a look at some of the things written about wiretapping and eavesdropping, and don't forget, when I say wiretap, those words were in quotes. That really covers, because wiretapping is pretty old-fashioned stuff, but that really covers surveillance and many other things. And nobody ever talks about the fact that it was in quotes, but that's a very important thing. But wiretap covers a lot of different things. I think you're going to find some very interesting items coming to the forefront over the next weeks.
I think you're going to find some interesting things coming to the forefront. Mr. Ambassador, did he know what was coming, do you think?
Well, it certainly looks like it, Brooke, and there have been other indications, comments by other individuals forecasting this. And it looks to me like a desperate effort to backfill, to find some justification for those outrageous, dishonest, and false tweets by Mr. Trump. But it's very important for us not to get away from the core questions here. And I believe that the White House itself is taking the wrong approach here. I wish they embraced Matt's approach of saying something very serious happened. Why don't they acknowledge what's happened and pledge full cooperation instead of these midnight viewing sessions purportedly on the 4th floor of the Eisenhower Executive Office building? And what's more, there's been no indication that this was anything other than routine intercepts incidental to tracking foreign officials and their conversations.
But it's not your
that
job.
May have picked up some Trump campaign conversations. So I think the White House is taking the wrong approach. It's inconsistent with Matt's own statement that we have a very serious, one of the most serious attacks on our country in decades. The White House should respect that and not do a cover-up with Mr. Nunes. It's shameful.
Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah.
I want to hear from you again before we go.
Yeah, a couple of points here. First of all, if you run an ethics organization, you ought to wait until all the facts come out. And I want to see what Director Comey says. I want to see what the Senate says. And I want to see what the House says. We don't have to make partisan defenses on either side. And if the team has made mistakes, or Chairman Nunes and others, you know, that's just all part of this. And I think the secondary part of this is that we keep using this word incidental surveillance. Let's be very clear about let's unpack that word, Brooke. What we're really saying is that Obama officials were able to look at the conversations of the Trump team. Now let's just let that sit in. Now I know that we don't know that to be a fact yet, but that is what is alleged. And through this process of the House and the Senate and the FBI, we're going to find out what's true and not true there. But if that's true, that is also very serious. And I would encourage everybody that cares about ethics to make sure that all of the guidelines were followed on that nobody's name was made public who shouldn't have been, because that's already been done once. And maybe it will be done more times. And I think that there are serious questions both sides want answers to.
Sure, sure. I think you're totally right. And just having had, former FBI guys on the show saying, it could have quite possibly been, which is maybe the presumption, that it was just conversations, regular conversations with foreign diplomats and ambassadors and that sort of thing. And it's par for the course to be picked up. Perhaps.
But we don't know.
We don't know. And I think to quote you, we need the truth. I appreciate both of you so much for coming.